from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. Welcome to Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music. On this episode, we explore equity and access in music education. We welcome Director of Bands at Joliet Central High School in Joliet, Illinois, Don Stinson. And now, our host of Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music, Scott Edgar.
Hi everybody, I'm Scott Edgar. Welcome to our next episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. So we just came back from the Illinois Music Educators Conference, and when I got back to Lake Forest College with my students, they all said, "Oh my goodness, I just went to a clinic," and they're still talking about it. So when my students keep on talking about a clinic, I know that I want to talk with this person. We have the distinct honor to talk with educator and author Don Stinson today. Don, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for leaving a lasting impact on our students.
You're a very kind student, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Don, the second that they started talking, and you and I had a pre-call where we started to delve into so many of these things, kindred spirits, like-minded, like-hearted, you have such a different way of approaching this world because of the different hats you wear. You have an author hat, you have a teacher hat, you have a scholar hat. We'll get to your book in just a second. But talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I grew up in Joliet, Illinois, and anyone out there, if you've ever watched the Blues Brothers, you've seen our prison, or if you've ever seen a few other shows, like that, you've seen parts of Joliet out there. It's love my hometown. It's a very, very diverse town. Lots of different people, lots of different opportunities everywhere. And I grew up in what a lot of people would say was probably a very rough childhood and many different rough neighborhoods. Scott, as part of the presentation I gave over IMEC, I thought it was important to be honest and vulnerable. So, the situation I grew up in, it happened, but it wasn't my fault. And, the nice thing about that was having an education system that knew what students in Joliet needed. So my journey is pretty much always tied into school and education systems and teachers. My education system growing up, it absolutely saved me. I had so many teachers with so many different approaches, not just music teachers, but they just knew what I needed at that point. And fascinating part of that is I learned very, very early on from my teachers that they all cared, but that caring came in many different forms. I had some very strict teachers. I had some very nice teachers, but they all came from a point of love. So growing up in that system, we had disadvantages. A lot of us growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. There was a lot of abuse going on at home. There were situations where maybe the opportunities presented to us were not the same opportunities that kids in other areas would get. But our teachers made sure that did not set us back, and they worked extremely hard. So for me, it's my life. But if I put it down in a brief statement there, I work in the town that I teach in now, and that town gave me so much, and I've made it one of my life's missions to give back to the town and the people in it that have given me, as I said, so much and made the life that I have today.
Don, that was so powerful, and I want to kind of pull one of those strings because you said that the teachers knew what you needed. And I think there's a lot of teachers out there who believe that that's just instinctual, that that's part of our role as a teacher of being an empath. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that for your students, you feel that same way, that you just have this kind of sixth sense that just you understand when our students are in need, have some of these challenges that whether we know what they are or not, they're bringing them to the space. What were some ways, and I know you mentioned that sometimes it's tough love. I think oftentimes when we think, it's, I'm going to show them that I care by just being a pushover and not having high standards. Oh, no. But that's that kind of that rub between compassion, empathy, and grace in rigor. So how did you experience those two worlds growing up?
Yeah, it's really simple. My teachers did not treat all of us the exact same way. And I know for some people out there, they might, oh, what does that mean? You didn't treat every kid equal. No, I didn't say that. They didn't treat us the exact same way. So I had, for example, a third grade teacher named Mrs. Saunders that I loved. And she would describe herself as a very excitable woman, right? And I forgot my homework one day, and the kid next to me, Jake, also forgot his homework one day. And she really got after me, but she didn't get after Jake that much. And I remember mustering up the courage afterwards to talk to her about that. I'm like, what? How come I got this, from you? And I remember her saying, she was so confident. She's just like, she goes, I know what you needed. I know that you wouldn't turn this homework in unless I got after you. And she goes, I want you to think about this. She goes, did I say anything mean to you? I said, no. She goes, I was a little loud, right? I said, yeah, you were a little bit loud on that. She goes, this is going to work for you though. This is what you need. That was kind of the extent of what I got, but it was fascinating. And then I had a few other teachers that had similar approaches to that. They would, they would call you out if you weren't giving to your full potential, whether it be in class, whether it be, I'd have teachers that would see me at the store and my shoes would be untied, and they would just like stop, stop shopping, and they're like, tie your shoes right now. So, oh, what do you do? No, tie your shoes right now. You're not going to crack your head open by falling out. Okay. So it's like a million little stories of that teacher just honing into who you were. I have another teacher, I've never mentioned this to him, but it was a teacher, Mr. Nordmark, I think in eighth grade. And I'll never forget Mr. Nordmark. Like eighth grade, I started to find myself a little bit, find my personality and speak out a little bit. And I remember Mr. Nordmark told me something one day, and he goes, you are one of the oddest people I have ever met. But the way he said it and the way he looked, it was not from a place of judgment. And it was one of those times where you could see the way he delivered it, and he knew I would take it that way, that this was not something to shut me up and shut me down and change who I was. It was, you're a little bit weird, but you know what? Arms wide open, here you are, continue. I'm getting teary on that. It just, it was always a space I felt with my teachers that I was okay being who I was, while at the same time, the position they were taking to try to get me to grow was to get me to grow in the best space possible for me.
Don, I think everyone listening here is tearing up because this is why we get into the profession in the first place, right? But there's something odd that happens specifically in the music classroom, that because we're all engaging with one piece of music, we're all engaging in larger classrooms, that sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult for us as music teachers. What it's all about is centering the child. But to know what every child needs, you need to know every child. And sometimes
Mhm.
that can be really, really hard.
Absolutely. The problem I think we have sometimes with music, especially performance music, is that we are very black and white with it, and we feel that we have to be a certain way every single day. So, I teach band, but I've also taught orchestra and choir. And let's be honest, performance music as we know it is the ultimate conformist activity, right? We all need to sound the same and look the same. And there's levels we can take, because I'll talk with my band about it, which is, hey, we're trying to be something bigger than we can be on our own, right? We are thinking about the collective unit, but what we're trying to do is find our special and unique Joliet sound. That requires that all of you as people are bringing your A game, of course. But there's also the other side of it where today in class, if you walked into my band room today, we were missing, my auditioned group is about 70 students. We were missing 35 kids from rehearsal, but they were in the band room. But they were upstairs in our practice rooms. They were with another, like a flute teacher in the auditorium. And, what were my goals today? It was, okay, we're going through West Side Story, we're going through this piece, we're going through that. But then you get a kid that started learning saxophone for me in jazz band. And then you see the kid come up and he's like, holy cow, I've never sounded like this before. Can I spend the band period upstairs playing saxophone? There's this piece I want to do. And absolutely, and I think it's that flexibility that we can have in that sense. And I think also in terms, because I really like to think practicality. I think as we look at these things in the individual student, I think it's going into autonomy and letting the kids pick the best use of their time. All right. And I'm not saying, Scott, that they sit on a laptop and watch YouTube or anything, at that point. I'm not saying that and maybe that is the best use of their time. I'm not to judge that. But if you walk into my classroom, some people are a little shocked with it, where if I'm rehearsing for quite a bit, because I talk a lot, as you didn't notice, but if I'm rambling on for a bit, my kids have this understanding with me that they can raise their hand and go, Mr. Stinson, are you going to be doing this for a while? And some people go, oh, because it's like, that's not how bands work. Um, but that's our agreement, and then they get two answers, which is no, hey, you're right, let's move on. Or they get the other answer, which is, you know what, I got to dig into this. And then they go, okay, and they literally stand up and they go work on something else instead of just sitting there, for a while. So, long story short, as I look at, the answer to your question, I think we can be it all. I think we can work on the collective parts and work towards success that way, while not ignoring our individual contributions. And I think we can also shift gears at a time and look at what that student needs individually and say, you know what, maybe the collective ensemble for you right now is not your best option. Maybe we need something that is better for you in this space and time.
Don, it's brilliant, and it shows so much trust and vulnerability on your part as a teacher to take a step back and embrace the students being with it enough to say, this is what I need in the moment, and not making the assumption that we always know what is best for them. That's why there's two big
Yeah.
buckets that we explore in SEL: identity and belonging. And in the end, people say, hey, Scott, what do we want for our students when we talk about this SEL world? Well, one of my primary answers is I want my students to be more independent. I want them
Yeah.
to be able to embark on this world and to be able to tackle some challenges with some skills. And I can think of a few better ways than what you just described, Don, is that you are giving them an opportunity to show that responsibility. And it's not looking at kitten videos on YouTube, but it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
very much engaging with the music and articulating, this is my goal, this is what I want to achieve, and I know that I need to do it in this way.
And here's the thing that's interesting. I didn't give a too much of an intro on Joliet, but we're a Title I district. We are in the band itself. We're approaching, I think, 80% low income, free reduced lunch. Most of our kids need an instrument supply from the school to participate. But the big thing where we talk about this autonomy thing as well is I came to a realization a few years ago why sometimes our school systems don't work for kids. And I have the majority of my band at home. I think they're not that I shouldn't say the majority. I think a lot of them at home are functioning as an adult. They're 14 to 18 years old. They're functioning as an adult. Some of them have jobs. They're contributing to the family household income. Some of them are caretaking for siblings. Some of them are cooking. And then they come to a building where they have to ask to go to the bathroom. So we can't be shocked when things aren't congruent in that sense. And I will say I am very, very blessed with my administration at Joliet that they let us run things in a way that is best for us, to provide that opportunity for kids. But that was one of the first things when I came to that band room, which is, you know what? I get it. You're functioning as an adult at home. So here are the things you just don't need to ask for. Do you need to ask to go to the bathroom? I explained, hey, yes, it is on me to know where you're at. This is the school rule, whether you agree with it or not, but let's come to this agreement, but I think again, going back to that autonomy and just starting to let the reins off, as safely as you can is certainly a way that people could see, I think, some positive changes in their programs.
And Don, I think we saw that so tangibly during the pandemic when we had remote instruction, right? And we saw that the students had responsibilities. We had an insight into their world that we weren't always privy to, and I think that was
Mhm.
really powerful. And I think, Don, as I look at this
Look
just
at that.
amazing addition to our libraries, high needs,
The
monumental
longest title
successes.
ever.
Nah, we'll work on it. Some of these SEL titles tend to ramble on.
Oh man. Yeah, yeah.
Teaching. So tell us about the project. I mean, it sounds to me like it is so much of you in this project.
Yeah, yeah. So here's what happens is that there's a little precursor to this. And again, I told you the situation I grew up in. I saw everything. I know everything about the town, but when I saw it mattered. All right. So seeing seeing racism and classism and being restricted by your socioeconomic status as a child is a lot different than seeing it when you're an adult or a teacher and you have a charge in front of you. It's very, very different. So there's a little catalyst for this, which was our band got accepted to a festival. And this is, by the way, one of my big things on SEL is that you can still have quality and focus on SEL. We're just going to throw that out there. Everything's possible. Does it take more work? Yeah, but there we go. Everything's possible. So um, we get accepted to this festival. And this festival, you have to audition. You have to make a tape, and it's blind auditions. And everybody that makes the cut is at least good. Okay, so that's how that thing goes. We play at this festival, and our kids are all wearing tuxedos and they are playing shiny instruments. But we just happen to be, if not the only, one of the only very, very diverse looking bands. At the end of this festival, they kind of do this dog and pony show where they bring the directors up and they list all of the bands. Our kids are sitting in a row in the back, and there's a couple of kids sitting in front of them next to the directors, and they recognize our band and they call out. They see the Joliet Central Band, and our kids super excited. We've worked so hard to get there. It again, we can do it. It just takes us a little longer. And it all went away because immediately, and they said our name. These two kids from another school and the directors in front of our kids, one said, "Hey, what band was that?" And the other kid goes, "Oh, that was that ghetto band." And you immediately saw kids just, and that was a real turning point for me in that sense. To have kids come to me afterwards, we had two reactions. We had kids come to me afterwards in tears about that, because they said not only did these kids say it, but their directors kind of chuckled, didn't do anything about it. I wasn't there because, again, I was being dog and ponied up on the stage. And then we had the second reaction, which was on Monday, I'm talking to the kids about it. Well, they had accepted it at that point. They said, you know what, we were a little upset on Saturday or so, but, they said, Mr. Stinson, you're from here. That's just how it is. And that was the catalyst for going, you know what? Is that how it is? Well, yeah, we saw it. There was evidence. That's how it is in our story there. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? And is there a solution to these things? I don't know. But being kind of an elder millennial, what did I do? I went on Facebook and just ranted about it for a minute, and and I had a wonderful support system that was throwing things out. But then I just started writing, and I started writing about what we do. And one of the first things I wrote was a big article called Practice Not Required, which is basically one of our methods, how we are able to do everything during the day. Um, and I sent that on to somebody, and they said, this is way too long to be an article, but I think you have something there. So then I just started writing a little bit more, and I wrote about my time coming up into the school system, but I really wanted to focus on, could somebody read this book and put something into place today or tomorrow? So it's very practical. There's a little bait and switch, I'll be honest. It's, teaching music to low income and underserved students. But I honestly, and this is not just like brand marketing stuff, I honestly think there's things in there that are just, you could just cross out the low income part because what I really want to drive home is that, and I say us as a former low income kid, like we are not that different. All right. The big thing that we find in some of these schools, and especially as we talk about SEL, is dysfunction. And that's what a lot of the book deals with, is identifying dysfunction in our students and our music programs, our schools, and our community. And then where can we come in as music teachers and not necessarily save the day, but where can we come in and put some practical approaches in that can help our students develop skills that are at base level, useful for them, and pie in the sky can help pull them out of poverty.
Don, I think there are many people right now who are saying, "Where can I get this?" And the answer is obviously GIA and all of the wonderful things there. But what was the most valuable thing for me? What you said, Don, is that there is often deficit thinking that when we approach this type of conversation and look at you mentioned it, the ghetto band, that automatically puts a deficit lens onto a certain population, which we are obviously combating as we're starting to talk about empathy, grace, social awareness, and understanding. My question for you is, if we put this book in as, mandatory reading in undergrad teacher education, what do you hope is the big takeaway after they navigate this book?
I hope the big takeaway is couple of things. I think number one would be patience. I think getting in tune with where the students truly are coming from is extremely important. As I mentioned already with the dysfunction, there are certain dysfunctions that are easy to deal with. If you don't teach a kid how to open their case, let's put the logo up on top, and they open the case wrong, you're going to get some damage to the instrument that's going to cost $100 or so, but we can fix it. And then we have some other things, and I do apologize if I'm being insensitive to anybody, but I grew up where my mother was married 3 times, but we were in between houses, and at some point she was a single mother. And in our Western society, especially, are you at a disadvantage if you grow up in a single parent household? Some sources would say yes. So for me, that was, a sense of dysfunction. And that's where, as I go back to the other start of it, where my teachers knew my situation and were able to help me in that sense. So I think it's patience, it's understanding where kids are coming from. And, the other part of this is I know this doesn't sound great to say this to educators, but I hope you come away from the book and then you go into your situation, and I hope that you're naive about the barriers that are up there. I hope you're aware of them, absolutely. But when you're standing in front of the kids, there's a little bit of magic that we have at the Joliet Band, because if we don't tell the kids how difficult something is, and we're talking skill building. All right, so I'm not talking like the real barriers right now. Like I get it, I recognize that. But when it comes to like, you know what, we really need to double tongue this part right now. There's a lot of people that come in, oh, those kids, they don't have this stuff. When we are naive enough to just not believe that it's not possible, that's a pretty powerful thing. And I know we can't put data behind that. And you could probably unpack that a little more. It's like, okay, well, what, Don, you want to believe in the kids, right? And that's pretty important. But I think then for the teacher, because I'm really big on teachers advocating for themselves, I'm hoping that teachers read this and also become empowered to not only advocate for themselves, but believe that they really are, I think a catalyst for some change that can happen with our kids.
I love that. I used to, even when I do undergrad methods and we're working on woodwinds, don't tell them that going over the break is hard. That just makes it harder, right? And then we're able to, at least say they can figure out that it's difficult on their own and say, hey, I'm tripping here, but we're not setting them up. We're not setting that hurdle up as something else.
But to throw a bone at that too, It's also identify because I got 3 kids. If I tell them something's hard, they look at me and they go, game on. So this is the other thing from the book. It's not a one size fits all thing. So that's that's the other part of that too. So, again, it comes back to knowing the kids and the personality there.
Don, I love it, and but I think that that's not even. I'm not going to say it's not common, but it's certainly not in all programs. We
Yeah.
certainly have. You've done some work. You've done some background work, and it seems to me like from your book and what we've talked about so far that you already have an entry point with your students because they know that you've been in their shoes, that you're from
Right.
that background, that you understand the reality. Any thoughts for teachers who may be teaching outside of that, outside of the background where they are teaching?
Yeah, that's an excellent point because I always say if you have street cred, use it, right? And the other thing I notice in my program, and we can come back to this later, but is that people really gravitate towards people that either look or act like them. And this is on a subconscious level. So again, the white kids in my band with no dads just come by me. It's just what I notice. My saxophone teacher, Phil, who's an older African American man who was raised by his grandparents. Literally, the African American boys raised by their grandparents go by him. And again, am I taking data on this? No, it's just something that I remember Phil and I talked about at some point. So I think there's a few things with it. I think that when we look at the reality and that we are all people that have had these journeys, I think when you become appropriately vulnerable in front of the students, you are going to find that you connect with them more than you think. I think there is that part, and I do think that any teacher can teach any student, and any student can learn from any teacher. But I also believe too that in the sense that what sometimes there's just better fits that work, and it might be permanent, it might be temporary. So in my program, we try to, and I know this is a very kind of the surface level thing, but we try to bring in student or teachers that look like our students, not just in a private lesson level, but leadership roles. Um, we have composers that have graduated from the school. One of our big time composers, Jermaine Stiegel, for example, he just wrote the music for Coming to America too, and then he commissioned a piece for us. And what did Jermaine do? He commissions this piece, flies out, and he starts telling me, he's like, listen, I would love to mentor any kids possible in the composition sense. So we have students that are working with Jermaine. Our students from African American backgrounds see Jermaine writing pieces. Like we had kids really getting excited about that point. Again, that's a very surface level thing though, because we dig deeper into just who we are, as people. Um, and I think that's that part where it's like, okay, you're a former low income kid. Now you're a teacher, and maybe you're teaching in a rich area. It doesn't mean you can't connect with those students. And I say that because that's where I've been before. And being vulnerable about that situation, having those appropriate conversations with the kids too. When I taught in Naperville, I was very honest about my situation, and I said, I'm telling you right now, I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I didn't grow up this way. You didn't grow up the way that I did. Let's learn something from each other in that sense. So I don't. I think it's to me, I look at that as like another catalyst for a pretty engaging and educational conversation between you and the kids.
You say it's surface, but I think it's really deep. I think if you're gonna be it, you have to see it. And
Yeah,
if we're
yeah.
putting people in front of our students, whether it be music, diverse composers, whether it be instructors, you're right. We'll gravitate to people who look, act, feel, believe, see the world like we do, and that has to be our entry point for us to grow from there. So while I don't think it's surface, I do think it's step one to
Mm.
having a more equitable space in our world.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. I got
It's
some things to think
powerful.
about then.
I think we all do. And, it's not an either or, but for me, I think don't discredit the power of putting that model in front of our students, because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a challenge and a call to action for all of us. So with this, Don, you mentioned very powerfully that you can have excellence and SEL. And, we've been talking about SEL the entire time. That's just part of the lifeblood of this conversation. But I wonder if you can start to unpack a little bit about what this looks like in your teaching world. How do you embed SEL into your instruction and still tackle West Side Story?
Yeah. So, it's funny. This is a little bit counter to everything I've been taught because if you go through a lot of school PD sessions, they're going through icebreakers, they're going through all sorts of things. My first rehearsal every single year is the band is and we have an established tradition at Joliet. So I'm going to say I got a point of privilege there. Our program is 110 years old, and I'm the fifth director in the history of the band. No pressure, right? So there's some established traditions there. But I've also done this at other schools. My first rehearsal every single year with the kids is I stand on the podium, they stop playing, I say concert F, and we start going at it. We don't introduce each other. We don't get into a conversation right away. But I established that this is going to be a place where I'm going to take your time seriously. And then you might ask a few things. You're like, okay, well, what if the kids don't have the concert app or anything like that? I start to see kids helping each other out. There's all sorts of things. And we go at it for about 20 minutes. And then we stop and we literally just start talking and get to know each other. And this is one of those things where, again, it doesn't work that well for a teaching evaluation, right? Well, you didn't get to know the kids at first. You didn't. And I argue, I'm like, no, I really got to know them in that 20 minutes. Verbally, no. But I'm seeing how this section works. I'm seeing how this kid is helping this kid out. I am identifying 7 or 8 kids that I can see how they move and how they play and how they carry themselves, and I can see that they are going to be somebody that's going to help bring other people to the next level. So that's kind of our start of the year. It's an interesting way that begins. But what happens then is we have a special daily setup at Joliet Central, which is the band students have band, and then immediately after they have band lunch. So they all have lunch together, and they stay in the band room for lunch. So what does that look like with rehearsals? Every rehearsal's a little bit different, but I will tell you this now is that the kids and I, we have a relationship that we know that there's a switch that we can flip, and that sometimes things are business and sometimes things are personal. So how does that look for us each day? The rehearsal, we get done what we need to get done. Do I turn up the heat on them sometimes? Absolutely. The bell rings, we take a breath, and it's like we were playing, a production on the stage, and our band room's a literal stage. And during lunch, I think it's so cool that our kids have gotten to such a strong point where I can get after them because something was out of tune. And then 2 minutes later, they're approaching me to show me some goofy video on YouTube, and they're taking their break. So I'd love to get even more complex with it, but it really is just that relationship with the students. It's observing them, it's knowing them. That first rehearsal, as I said, is pretty intense, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But I also make sure surface level, you're knowing every name of the kid by the end there. You're knowing something about them. I loved. It just takes time. The band director, Indiana University, Rodney Dorsey, he says that his kids, Indiana is a college, right? He has a personal conversation with everybody in his band, like the first week of school. That takes a long time, but it's worth it. So it's small things like, well, I wouldn't say small. That takes a lot because we have that with our band as well. I put that in. It takes like 3 weeks, but honestly, did we get to as much music as we wanted to? No, but you know what? Week 4, I don't have to convince this kid to do what's best for them. That kid doesn't have to convince me of anything, and that they're, not worth something, for example. So that's where we're at with it. It's that individual connection. It's knowing the families. I mean, that's an important one. Just call a family. And I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but call a family in the evening, just letting you know, hey, I want to know more about your family and your kid. You know, most of the time they're really receptive to it. I've had a couple of times that they're just like, no, thanks. Which is fine. And I remember I talked to the kid the next day. Hey, I hope I didn't impose. He goes, no, that's how we are. Don't take it personally. Just, just stay out of her home.
You know what's so interesting about this is that relationships take time. And we
Yeah.
say relationships are important in the music classroom, but then we don't take the time to nourish them. And my guess is by the time you get to week 4, everything is just on high-speed rails. Everything else becomes easier because you've laid that groundwork of that individual relationship. Had the pleasure of meeting and working with Rodney Dorsey when he was at University of
wonderful.
Michigan. He is just an amazing human being and phenomenal musician. But I put those in the right order. He's an amazing human being and a phenomenal musician.
I did. There's one thing, and this is what I would love anybody out there to do. Every single concert, I write a note to every kid on their program. And I'll be honest with you, I did this at first as a recruitment thing. And I had 30 kids in a band at a school that I worked at, and I wanted more. I just wanted more kids in music. So the concert day comes, and I have these programs, and they're written out to every single kid. Scott, I've really enjoyed getting to know you this year. Good luck on your solo today. Okay. Susie, you have just opened up so much in class. You've made me laugh so much. Congrats. I know you're going to have a great performance. Every single kid got one. And I started doing that for every class. And all of a sudden, the band numbers went up. And by the way, little teacher pro tip here, it was also a nice way to take attendance, because if there were 2 left over, there you go. So I did that, and then the next year there are like 60 kids in band, and I kept doing that. And the next year there's 120. And Scott, the year that there's 120, and this is just how my brain works, I wanted to get lazy. And I remember our first concert coming up, and the concert was Thursday, and this was a Wednesday, and I wasn't going to do the programs anymore because 120 kids, that's a lot of writing. And then I had this little freshman come up to me. Mr. Stinson, I'm so excited for the concert tomorrow. I can't wait to see what you write in the program. I heard you get a program to every kid. And I say, yep. And I printed out some extra programs, brought them home, sat in front of the TV, and I didn't rush through it. It takes like 3 or 4 hours, and that's something I've been doing probably for 15 years now. And, it's never a generic note. It's always something about that student, or about the relationship we have, or the relationship they have with the group. But I'm going to be honest with you. There have been a couple of times where there were 3 or 4 kids. As I'm writing their note, I had a lot of trouble finding something personalized, and that told me at that point, okay, you're at a 97%, buddy. Get up to the 100%, and really, if you're going to do it, go all in.
That 97% leaves the 3% out. And that is our call to action. Our call to action.
And that 97% is a music F. We already know that, right? That's
Yep.
It's just, and that's on us.
A- doesn't sound very good.
No.
Absolutely. Don, there was another point, and I kind of want to wrap things up with this, because I think that oftentimes when we start to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing as a profession right now, we start to talk about things such as burnout. We know that relationships are one of the critical pieces to combating burnout. But along with that, I think so many teachers right now are just craving agency. And I know that teacher agency is a big thing for you. Can you send us out just talking a little bit about your thoughts on this?
Oh, I love helping people be autonomous and stand up for themselves in this sense. And it really is just to help people be empowered in that sense. So from a practical standpoint, if you look up my name on the Yamaha Educator Suite, I've got 4 or 5 articles that are up there. They're free to get, and they're about saying no and when to be selfish and things like that. So that content is out there. Um, but we're lacking a transition in education, right? We have with our students many different approaches and many different avenues for students to get the instructional delivery that they need. And I think schools are legitimately trying at that. And then we're seeing that a little bit more in the colleges as well, where we're getting students what they need in the direction that is best for them. But sometimes we're, I think, lacking a transition, especially in the teacher world, from, hey, I was raised in this space, I was raised in schools for so long, and now I am the teacher. Um, and I feel like I have to now fit into this cookie cutter deal. So one of my other things with SEL is that, again, it's not one size fits all, but also as the teacher and the deliverer of it, this does not mean that you need to change your personality in most senses as well. You can still be you, and I think that's so much healthier for kids to encounter teachers with different personalities all over. So teachers, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure it resonates with other people. I don't want it to be treated like a child necessarily. I understand I'm an employee. I understand that I have bosses and I have to do certain things. But I'm also a professional that wants some autonomy and some agency, and especially in the music sense, where we, have sometimes a performance product that we're having to put out there, to put it that way. I want to make sure that I am able to call some of the shots that are, the best for my kids. Is it because I have a power trip? No, it's because I've written 900 notes to these kids based on what I know about them, and I've done a lot of work to engage with these students. So yeah, I feel like I'm the best person for that with my group. So I think it's important for teachers. I'll be honest, the ball's in our court a little bit right now. And I think it's important to start to maybe express some of that agency and to understand, what is best for your students and to stand up for that. And they're not always fun conversations. But as as silly as this sounds, like I've worked with some teachers before, we've workshopped literally saying no, how to say no. We get all sorts of things up there. I have 5 kids. My friend does not have any kids. People have come to him before and said, hey, can you help out with this? Because Don has 5 kids and he can't. You know what? That's not anyone's business. It doesn't matter if I have 5 kids, he has 15 kids, Martians at home, no kids, whatever. I think it's just small examples of things like that, where if we can make sure that we have our autonomy and our agency there, and we can make decisions not only that are best for the kids, but best for ourselves, that's important. And I think that's another big thing with teachers today too, is that we really have to be careful about setting ourselves on fire to keep others warm. Because once you've given everything you've got, you don't have anything else left to give. And as harrowing as this sounds, no one wants to be useless, right? And no one wants to feel like they're useless. So I'm big on that. I'm big on teachers also having a separation of their school and their life. You can't miss something when you're there all the time, right?
Well, that's what was so hard about our intimate relationships when we were in lockdown. You can't miss each other if you are in the same house for months after months after months. Yeah. Thank you for saying that about catching fire, because I've often said that The Giving Tree is actually by Shel Silverstein is actually a really terrible example.
It's a horror story. Yeah.
You got it for us to put out there. That is the burnout right there. Don, what an amazing addition for us to be able just to hear you speak. And I know that many people are going to go and check out your book. But on a very, very personal note, I can see why my students are just literally on fire for you and your message. And whether it be SEL, whether it be advocating for your students, realizing that 97% is not enough, or teacher agency, thank you from the bottom of my heart for the message you've given us today.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and I've dug into your work as well, and I know this is kind of a little, public fanboying back and forth, but your work has been something, especially lately as I'm reading through the book you just edited, um, that has been something that's really clarified things for me and challenged me in a sense on what I know, because all I know is what I know. All I know is my area and what I live every day. So sometimes I think you can get to a point where you think you've mastered something, or you get it, and then a work comes in there, you know, and it challenges you, and it makes you take a different approach, and you go, you know what, yeah, let's try this, because it could be something that elevates us to the next level in our little corner of the world. So my thanks to you on that.
Don, thank you. And what's so magical about that book is that it's the voices of teachers who are making
Absolutely.
this work across the country and surrounding themselves with like-minded and like-hearted, just how we did today. Don,
Absolutely.
thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you for all you're doing for our profession. Please be well.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. What a gift Don gave us today to understand from his background that 97% relationships in our classroom is not enough. 97 is just the beginning, and we have 3 students. When we say music for all, Don epitomizes that. I would like to thank GIA Publications for their support in continuing this high-quality work. Thank you to Music for All, and thank you for Yamaha. Please make sure you check out Don's book at your earliest convenience. For Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. Thank you.
From Music for All and our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America, thank you for joining us for this episode of Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music. Yamaha is your partner in music education, not just through instruments and professional audio, but also through teacher resources and support. Visit YamahaEducatorSuite.com as your go-to source for your music program needs and professional development. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music for all. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in their scholastic environment. We are extremely grateful for any donations gifted to our nonprofit organization. If you enjoyed this episode of Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music, and in order for us to continue providing our free educational resources and advocacy materials, please consider giving to Music for All in any amount at musicforall.org/give.